We are starting a new series today in honor of Mother's Day, but it's a series that's on family, and we're just starting today on Mother's Day with a series called Endangered Species, Saving Families. We're beginning by honoring mothers for several reasons. One is it's in response to the fifth commandment of the Ten Commandments. God made it clear. Paul quoted this commandment in Ephesians chapter 6, beginning with verse 1. He said this, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that so it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth." Paul is telling us here in this passage that in God's created order of things, He put a structure in place to bless us. And that structure is centered on the family. A mom and a dad, a husband and a wife, and then bringing children into the world and raising those children to know Jesus and follow after Him. God has that structure in place to bless us. And anytime we get away from the structure God put in place to bless us, we all suffer consequences, negative consequences, for not having that in place in our lives. So this series on family, I believe, is timely and critically important because I'm convinced that the family unit, as designed by God, is the cornerstone of our personal, emotional, and spiritual well-being. I believe the family is the building block of society as God designed society to function. And I don't think you have to look around very much to be convinced that the family is under attack in our culture today. Big time. There are forces at work to try to rip apart the idea of the family unit as God originally designed it to be and designed it to function. And anytime you take something that is a core thing out of society that God intended for it to be there, then all of society suffers really bad consequences. It has a chain reaction effect on every other part of the culture too. So the family is a critical unit to the way God wants our society to be structured. And because the family is under attack, there needs to be a response to keep it from going the direction that it seems to be going. And I believe the church is God's instrument in our culture that should be giving the right response to the attack on the family. And I don't believe the right response is simply to push back against those evil forces attacking the family. I think we need to do that. That's part of the cultural war. But I'm convinced the cultural war is stacked against us, and we're not going to win it by just doing that, by just saying you're wrong and that's not the way it ought to work and attacking those who are attacking us. I don't believe that's going to win the cultural war. I believe instead we need to combine that pushback with something else that we haven't been in recent history as a church, church worldwide, doing the job we need to do of teaching God's plan for the family and calling people and equipping people to listen to and learn and follow that plan that God gives us for the family. And when the church fails to do that job, there is no other voice in our society that will call people to God's plan. That's supposed to happen through the church. So here at Lakeshore, the other elders and I, the staff here, we're all committed to trying to lift up God's plan for the family, to teach it, to support it, to encourage it, to help facilitate it, so that we can all grow into that image of being the families that God wants us to be. Because through the church, we can change the families within the church. By changing the families within the church, we change the community. By changing the community, we impact the culture. And that's what God has called the church to do. So it needs to start with us. We are the church. We are the ones who are supposed to be setting the example, teaching by word and deed what God's plan is, what God's structure is for society. Today we're going to begin by looking at mothers, and I'm excited about that because there are 85 million moms today that are going to be celebrating Mother's Day today. And that's a huge number of people that if we could get them to see God's plan and the value God places in them as moms, it could change our world in a very positive way. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I want to start, though, the first thing, number one on your outline is this, is as I was preparing for this series on the family, there are some current trends that are happening, and I looked at the statistics and things that are happening in our culture, and there's some good to these trends, but there's a lot of bad to these trends too. And I just wanted to share with you several of these trends that are going on here in America right now. The first trend that I see is for moms is there has, over the years now, developed a more career focus for women and for moms than there's ever been before. Now, there's some good to that and there's some bad to that. To be more career focused, in order to do that, quite honestly, you have to give up some things to be able to do that. Some things, priorities have to shift. For the career to become the higher priority, it means some other things can no longer be the higher priority anymore. And there's some good things that have happened with job opportunities for women, with the ability to make more money now. And even though it's not totally equal yet, it's getting closer to getting paid the same thing for a job that a man does. There's been improvements in that area, and that's a good part of this. But the negative side is that there's always a price to pay. There's always something that has to be pushed further down the list of priorities to put the career on the higher part of the list of priorities. And sometimes family bears some of that shifting of priorities. Sometimes it suffers some from the shifting of priorities. Even when you don't mean for it to, it's not your intent. Sometimes that just happens. It's a natural consequence. Today, we have more female breadwinners in families than ever before in our history as a country. In fact, 40% of moms are now in the United States the primary providers financially for their families. 40% of moms. That's the highest number it's ever been in our country. Now, the negative side to that is it puts more pressure on the moms. I mean, they're still trying to be the moms, and if they're married, they're still trying to be the wives, and they're still trying to keep the home life going the way it needs to go, but there's that financial pressure now that everybody's depending on that paycheck, and you can't help but feel the pressure if you know that's the case. It begins to kind of wear on you and build on you. Another trend is happening, and a lot of people have not really noticed this until I had not really been keenly aware of this until I read the stats. There is a trend toward older motherhood now. More women are waiting till they're older to start having kids in America today. And there's some good to that, and I know the thinking behind it is two things. Well, I could get my education behind me. I can get going in my career a little more. Maybe we'll be a little more stable as I wait a little bit longer. We'll be more stable as a family, and then we can have kids, and we'll be better equipped and ready then for the kids when we start having the kids. And I know that's the thinking behind it. The problem is the reality hasn't been playing out that way. Those homes haven't been found to be more stable, and the kids haven't found to be better off just because you waited longer to start having kids. In fact, there's a couple of negatives to this, problems with this. One is the birth rates among all age groups in America have declined except among women 35 years of age and older. That's the only age bracket in America where the birth rate is increasing in that age group for women. And 20% of all women now in America will go through their childbearing years without having a child at all. There's several reasons for that. One is they see it as an interruption on their career path to do that, so it's more of a selfish kind of thing. For some, it's because they didn't find the mate, the spouse that they wanted to have in life, and so they never got married and started a family. For some, though, it's not by choice. They waited till later, they wanted to have a baby, and they started trying, but you look at the medical statistics, and fertility rates begin to drop as you hit that 35-year age and up. So even if you want to have children then, some of them are not able to then at that point. So that's another trend. There's the trend toward more career focus. There's the trend toward older motherhood. There's also a third trend that is really growing in America, and that is the trend toward multiple roles that women are taking on. Some by choice, some not by choice. It's just kind of being pushed on them. I already talked about a couple of these. One is, well, I have to be the primary breadwinner for the home now. And that's a role that they're taking on. So there's pressure with that. But then I'm still a mom too, so I still have to be the mom role. So I've got breadwinner, career person, and I've got mom role. So I've got two hats to wear there. And then if you are married, well then I'm a wife too, and I've got to put that hat on. And then you're also, hopefully, you're still trying to have some kind of social life. You're trying to still be friends with your friends and do things with them. So you got the friend hat that you're putting on. And then you could be a coach, or you could, there are all different kind of things you can add to that, other hats that you can add to it. And before you know it, you're juggling so many different things that you can't slow down for a minute and relax at all. And man, you talk about a pressure-filled life. You take on all of those roles and you keep adding more to it and not taking anything away from it. And before you know it, you just feel overwhelmed all the time. And the pressure can get to you. It really can. Well, added to that, the fourth one is, and we already alluded to it a little bit, it's the financial pressures. There are a lot of things that have contributed to the financial pressures that mothers and women are facing today. One is, of course, single-parent households where you have only one income, that you're trying to take care of everything that has to be taken care of just from your salary, and that's hard. We even know that a lot of families with two incomes, it's hard, right? It's a struggle then. Some of it we brought on ourselves because we're trying to live above our means, but some of it is just the reality of it's expensive to live in this world and raise kids. And when you're doing it as a single mom, what a challenge to do it that way. And then, in addition to that, there's been this prolonged recession in our economy. We're not fully recovered from this recession yet. It's still going on. There's been a lot of job loss. There have been a lot of companies go out of business. There have been a lot of people who have been downsized and taken out of their jobs. They've had to take other jobs that pay much less than what they were making, and that adds even more pressure then to everything that they're dealing with already. In addition to that, there's those options for, do I send my kid to public school, or there's private school an option, and then that costs so much if you want to look at that option, or do I homeschool, but I got to have my career, so I can't home. So you see how hard it can get to have to work through all of those things? And then, as you get a little older, here's what begins to happen. Not only are you trying to take care of your own children, but you have aging parents who start needing more care and attention. And boy, you talk about a demanding thing when you have parents that are aging and needing care, and that starts taking part of your attention and your time and your resources to be sure they're cared for. Now, you put all four of these trends together and they're all happening at the same time. I'm convinced that the role of mom is harder today than it's ever been in our country. I think it's more challenging today than it's ever been. And that's why I think a mom that's committed to this and working hard at it is a superhero. I think you are amazing to be doing what you're doing. And I want you to know how much we appreciate the effort that you have to put forth to try to juggle all those things that you're trying to juggle. But I am concerned about those trends, not just because of the pressures you feel because those things are happening, but because of what it's leading to as a society, as a culture. You see, it's less than 100 years ago that the architects of atheistic communism predicted the demise of the traditional family, and they were happy about it. They thought that the traditional family needed to be done away with because the only way a communist government can control the people is to make them dependent on the government. And if you can have a breakdown of the family, then you become more and more dependent on the government all the time. And that's really happening right here in America today. All the statistics point to this. We have more people taking out benefits from the government now than we've ever had before. And we also have fewer people paying into those benefits to the government than we've ever had before. No society ever in history has been able to sustain that for very long, ever. You reach a tipping point where you can't do it that way anymore. And that's how the communist government grew to power. It convinced the people, we can't do it this way anymore. You have to relinquish all control to the government and let us take care of you. Can you see that trend happening in America? I can. And a lot of other religious leaders can see it happening too. We're going more and more toward thinking the government is supposed to take care of us. And if we're dependent on the government, then the family structure is not such a big deal anymore. It's okay if we don't have the traditional family unit anymore. We've got the government. The government will take care of us. The real problem with that is the government only has one source of revenue and resources, and it's me and you. And there's only so much to get. And so we relinquish all authority and control to the government. What if that government, like our government today, becomes less and less Christian, less and less God-fearing, less and less wanting the values that the Bible says we're supposed to have, and we relinquish control to that government? What happens to all of society then? You see, that happened in the communist countries all around the world. At the height of the strength of the Soviet Union, Lenin, who was one of the architects of communism, said this: "We must now say proudly that there's not a country in the world like Soviet Russia where women enjoy full equality." You hear the terminology he's using? Full equality. That's what American women are all about, right? We want full equality. But listen to what he goes on to say. "Where women are not placed in the humiliating position of day-to-day family life. This is one of the most important priorities of communism. Homemaking is the most unproductive, the most barbarous, and the most arduous task a woman can do. It is exceptionally petty and does not include anything that will promote the development of the woman." That's atheistic communism. And it sounds really familiar to what a lot of people in our government are saying today. Just think about it. There's a teacher in school that asked the little girls, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" One of the girls says, "I want to be a scientist." The teacher says, "Oh, that's great. I'm so glad you've got an aspiration like that to be a scientist." "Well, what about you, Susie? What do you want to do when you grow up?" "Oh, I want to be in the military, an officer in the military. I want to help be one of the leaders in the military." "Oh, that's so commendable. That's wonderful. So glad you want to do that. What do you want to do, Jane?" "Well, I want to grow up to be a wife and a mother." And in many schoolrooms today, there would be dead silence if there wasn't ridicule and criticism, because they see that as not having any real goals at all in this culture. And by God's design, the role of wife and mother is honored above all other roles a woman could have. You see how far away we're getting from God's design and pattern for society? And when the family unit breaks down, if that is the cornerstone of our society, then all of society breaks down with it. That's why I'm so troubled by these trends, because they sound like they're leading to a lot of the thought process that led to communism. Now, you know how well communism worked, right? It didn't work well at all. It's not worked anywhere it's been tried, ever. So is there any hope then? How do we get this thing turned around? Well, here's something you may not know too, a great statistic. If the trend continues, China is still a communist government. If the trend continues, in 20 to 25 years, China will be the most Christianized country in the world. More Christians there than anywhere else in the world. Christianity is growing by leaps and bounds in the middle of communist China, because the church there is changing lives from within and turning the culture inside out. And that's what we've got to do here in America. It falls to the church to call people back to God's pattern and God's plan for the way society is supposed to be structured and the way families are supposed to be structured. It's the church that needs to be that voice in our culture today. Well, because of that, the second thing on your outline here that I want to focus on today is Scripture and what it has to say in particular today about moms, since it's Mother's Day, as a part of that structure that God has for society. We're going to look, number 2 here, at the qualities of magnificent moms. I think we've got some magnificent moms in this room here. I know some of you, and I know what you're doing and how you're investing in your family and in your children. I think we've got some magnificent moms here. And the Scripture does reveal to us some characteristics of magnificent moms. And if we can learn these and start trying to produce these, reproduce these in our families and churches, then all of society will be blessed by that and changed by that in a good way. So I want to look at a passage that's not a traditional Mother's Day passage today, but I believe it speaks very strongly to these characteristics of a magnificent mother. It's found in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, beginning with verse 6. Paul is writing to a young church in Thessalonica. Thessalonica is a city there where a congregation exists, and it's a new church, it's a new congregation. And he's writing to give them encouragement and instruction, and he's reminding them of their role as apostles in dealing with the church. And in doing so, he uses the analogy of motherhood. And it's really cool. Let's look at it, beginning in verse 6. We're not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else, even though as apostles of Christ, we could have asserted our authority. Instead, we were like young children among you. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. In this analogy that he uses as he compares their work as apostles to that of a mother, I want you to see the characteristics he says are great characteristics for a mother that they were trying to emulate as apostles. The first one is this: a magnificent mother has a gentle strength about her. A gentle strength. Look at verse 7 again. He says, just as a nursing mother cares for her children. And the terms used in the original language are talking about a mother that has just given birth and taken that child to her breast to nurse that child. You talk about a beautiful picture of gentle strength. That's a beautiful picture. I mean, to have gone through the pregnancy, look at how strong you got to be to go through that. But to go through childbirth itself, I mean, he's picturing a mother that's just given birth. And childbirth puts more demands on the body of a woman than anything else that they could do in their lives. It takes more out of them to give birth than anything else they can do. So there's strength being seen there. But think about the gentleness of holding that brand new baby and nursing that baby, caring for that baby. You see, there's the combination of great strength and great gentleness at the same time. And he's saying that's one of the things that makes moms and God's plan for moms so special. We need that in our culture, that combination of strength and gentleness. We need that present in the lives of children that are growing up in the world today. They need to have a mother there to show them that balance between gentleness and strength at the same time. And a mother can do that like nobody else, because of the strength that's required to be a mother and the gentleness that's required to care for that child that is brought into the world. I can remember when our first child was born, our daughter was born first, Heather, and I can remember watching my wife, and I was just amazed at the strength and the gentleness that she showed during that time. In fact, while she was giving birth, they had me in there with her, and she was holding my hand, and she brought me to my knees, squeezing that hand as she was giving birth. I thought, I've never known that she was that strong until she was giving birth, and she hurt my hand. She literally hurt me, squeezing my hand. Not like she was hurting, but she hurt me too. But I saw her with that beautiful baby girl, and she seemed to, even though she was nervous and we were young parents, she just seemed to take to it so well and be able to be so quickly at ease doing what needed to be done to take care of that baby. I, on the other hand, struggled a lot with that. I felt like I was going to break this baby. I thought, I watched nurses and I watched my wife, and they would just flip them around and do all kinds of stuff. And I'm thinking, you're going to break her, be careful with her. But they knew how to do it with strength, but yet the right gentleness at the same time. I can remember I wasn't great at being that dad that changed diapers all the time and all that, but once in a while I would try to help out and change a diaper. And you got to remember, back when we had our first child, there were no Pampers or sticky tabs. We had those cloth diapers. And we had diaper pins. These are like weapons, big sharp metal weapons that you use to attach that diaper with, right? And so I had seen my wife do it and watched her, and I thought, okay, I can do this. And the first time I tried to change a diaper, it was a lot harder than I thought. You had a lot of things to think about. First of all, you had to get it tight enough that it doesn't fall off. The first time I tried, it fell right off of her, right? You don't want it to fall off of her, and you don't want anything to fall out of it. So you got to get it tight enough that nothing falls out and it doesn't fall off. But then you can't get it so tight that she turns blue, because you've got it just so secure and so tight that the blood flow's cut off. So you got to get that delicate balance, and you got to have a gentle strength to get that right balance there between those two things. I wasn't very good at that. But my wife, she had it figured out. She could do it. And I love that combination of gentleness and strength. In fact, that's required to do the teaching that God wants the mom to do in the lives of their children. You got to have strength, but you got to be gentle in your approach too. After all, we learn a lot from our moms, don't we? Maybe you've seen a list like this. I ran across another one recently that I really liked, and maybe you've seen one familiar to it. It's things my mother taught me. I want to share some of these with you. Maybe you can relate. My mother taught me to appreciate a job well done. If you're going to kill each other, do it outside. I just clean the house. My mother taught me about religion. You better pray that comes out of the carpet. She taught me about time travel. If you don't straighten up, I'm going to knock you into the middle of next week. My mother taught me logic, because I said so, that's why. My mother taught me foresight. Make sure you wear clean underwear in case you're in an accident. Any of you have your mom tell you that? I didn't say it to my mom because I was afraid she'd smack me in the next week. But I thought to myself, Mom, if I have an accident, it won't matter if they were clean to start with. It's not going to come out that way after the accident. My mother taught me irony. You keep crying and I'll give you something to cry about. She taught me about the science of osmosis. Shut your mouth and eat your supper. It's hard to do both. She taught me about doing the impossible. Will you look at that dirt on the back of your neck? Think about it. My mother taught me about the weather. Your room looks like a tornado went through it. She taught me about the circle of life. I brought you into this world. I can take you back out. She taught me about medical science. If you don't stop crossing your eyes, they're going to freeze that way. She taught me about ESP. Put your sweater on. Don't you think that I know when you're cold? My mother taught me humor. When that lawnmower cuts off your toes, don't come running to me. My mother taught me about my roots. Shut that door behind you. You don't think you were born in a barn, do you? My favorite, my mother taught me about justice. One day you'll have kids, and I hope they turn out just like you. Pretty good list, right? Maybe you've got some of your own that you grew up with. But here's the thing. The role that God designed for a mother to have does require that balance between gentleness and strength. And man, we need that in our culture, in our homes, in our families. It's certainly an attribute of a magnificent mom to have both gentleness and strength. There's a second attribute that he talks about in this in verse 8, and that is a genuine affection. He says, because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. He talks about sharing their lives with them. If anybody shares life with others, it's a mother. She has to give so much of herself to others in her life because she is in that role as a mother. There was a kid in school, they were studying fractions in their class, and the teacher asked him, if your mom bakes a pie and you cut it into pieces and everybody gets an equal piece, what size piece of pie would you get? And he said, and there's 6 people in your family, remember? He said, I'd get 1/5. And she said, you don't know your fractions very well, do you? He said, no, you don't know my mom very well. So my mom would say something like, oh, I don't need any pie. I'm okay without it. You guys can have more pie. See, moms are always doing something like that. They're always putting others ahead of themselves. They're always putting the needs of others ahead of their own comfort and their own needs. At least a magnificent mom does that on a regular basis. Most of us know about genuine affection because we first learned it from our mothers, making the sacrifices that they make, giving and loving the way they love and the way they give. You see, their love is not just emotional. It's put into action. It's selfless. It's a giving kind of love. In fact, it's a reflection of God's love and the way God loves us. That's how we first get to know what God means when he says he loves us, by seeing it being lived out in the way our mother loves us For many of us, that's the way we learn. As a church, we want you to know that we want to return that affection to you because you're always giving so much. You're always sacrificing so much. We want to thank you and give you a gift today. I'm going to ask our guys that serve to come back up. We're going to give out some gifts for you here. Whoever served communion, you guys come right on back up here to the stage, okay? Hurry, hurry, hurry. Here we go. Don't make me come out there. Come on up. Thank you. Come up here to the stage where we've got these gifts. What we're going to do is give these gifts out. But with these gifts, I want you to know what we're giving you. A couple of things. One is a card that can be used as a bookmark or a card that you keep that's got a story written on it called Grandma's Hands. And I'm going to read that story as we pass out these gifts here in a minute because it's a good connection to the gift that we're giving you. The gift in the bag is a jar of lotion. It's a really good lotion. It's really all natural, very healthy for you. And it's especially good for your hands. And I want you to listen to the story as I read it, as you think about getting this lotion, and later on when you put this lotion on your hands, maybe you'll think about this story called Grandma's Hands. I'm going to ask all the moms, if you would, to stand up right now. Every mom we've got in the room right now, just stand up right where you are. First of all, let's thank them all for all that they do. Guys, I want you to go ahead and give every mom one of those gifts and one of those cards there. And I want to read this story to you that was written by Melinda Clements, and it goes like this. Grandma, some 90-plus years old, sat feebly on the patio bench. She didn't move, just sat there with her head staring down at her hands. When I sat down beside her, she didn't acknowledge my presence, and the longer I sat, I wondered if she was okay. Finally, not really wanting to disturb her, but wanting to check on her at the same time, I asked her if she was okay. She raised her head and looked at me and smiled. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you for asking, she said in a clear, strong voice. I didn't mean to disturb you, Grandma, but you were just sitting there and staring at your hands, and I wanted to make sure you were okay. Have you ever looked at your hands, she asked. I mean, really looked at your hands? I slowly opened my hands and stared down at them. I turned them over, palms up and then palms down. No, I guess I never really looked at my hands, and I tried to figure out what it was, the point that she was trying to make. Grandma smiled and related this story. Stop and think for a moment about the hands you have, how they've served you well throughout your years. These hands, though wrinkled and shriveled and weak, have been the tools I've used all my life to reach out and grab and embrace life. They braced and caught my fall when as a toddler I crashed upon the floor. They put food in my mouth and clothes on my back. As a child, my mother taught me to fold them in prayer. They tied my shoes and pulled on my boots. They held my husband and wiped my tears when he went off to war. They've been dirty, scraped, and raw, swollen and bent. They were uneasy and clumsy when I tried to hold my newborn son. Decorated with my wedding band, they showed the world that I was married and loved someone special. They wrote my letters to him and trembled and shook when I buried my parents and my spouse. They've held my children and grandchildren. They've consoled neighbors and shook in fist of anger when I didn't understand. They've covered my face, combed my hair. They've washed and cleansed the rest of my body. They've been sticky and wet, bent and broken, dried and raw. And to this day, when not much of anything else of me works really well, these hands hold me up and lay me down and again continue to fold in prayer. These hands are the mark of where I've been and the ruggedness of my life. But more importantly, it will be these hands that God will reach out and take when He leads me home. And with my hands, He will lift me to His side. She said, I will never look at my hands the same again. But I remember God reached out and took my grandma's hands and led her home. When my hands are hurt or sore, or when I stroke the face of my children or my husband, I think of Grandma. I know she's been stroked and caressed and held by the very hands of God Himself. So as you take this gift today and as you rub this lotion on your hands, just think about how God, through the life of a wife or a mother or grandmother, can through those hands bless and touch so many other people. And I know God's going to use your hands. He's already been using your hands in that way. And we just wanted to give you a blessing of thanks for all that you do. Well, there's another attribute that I want us to focus on today that Paul talks about in verse 9. It is the generous sacrifice that our mother makes. It says, surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We work night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. I read the stat this week again. It reminded me. It said that by the time a child graduates from high school, a mother has devoted some 18,000 hours of herself in her children's life. 18,000 hours of giving yourself to the good of somebody else, to your child. And here's what we know. It doesn't stop when they graduate from high school either, does it, moms? No matter what age your kids are, you're still investing in their lives. No matter how old they are, they're still your kids. No matter how old you are, you're still their mom. So the hours continue that you're investing in the lives of your children. That's a sacrifice, to give of yourself for the good of someone else. And again, we learn a lot about sacrifice from watching the role of a magnificent mother. And we can understand how God was willing to sacrifice for his children in the giving of his son Jesus, because we've experienced sacrifice by watching moms. There are other roles, though, that women play that as mothers that are a little different than the traditional roles, right? We have people here at Lakeshore who serve as foster moms, foster parents. And that's a unique role, and it's a hard one. We need more and more women willing to do that, men and women willing to be foster parents for kids today that don't have that home structure that they need to have, and they need a place to go and be cared for and learn about God and God's love in their lives. Maybe you see that as something that God could use you for. And then we have adoptive moms who didn't give birth themselves but adopted other children that needed a new life, a new home, a place to grow up in and be cared for. And that's another way of sacrificing, to adopt a child that you didn't even give birth to yourself, but to take them in, make them one of your own, and love them and care for them. And we're thankful for all of those ways that women, that mothers sacrifice. To help emphasize that, there's a video that Hallmark came out with this year that I thought was pretty unique on their part, that talks about, that really illustrates for us what we're talking about when we talk about the sacrifice of a mother. I want you to see it. It helps put it in perspective, doesn't it? And I thought it was pretty cool that Hallmark actually told you to make a card for your mother, because she deserves it. Because when we get aware of it, when we're really aware of the sacrifice we're talking about here, it makes it very difficult, doesn't it, on Mother's Day, to give them a gift that you think is sufficient, that's good enough for your mom, if you've had a good mom. And it reminded me of the story of these three sons that were raised by their mom, and they did well. They were very financially successful. And one more Mother's Day was coming around, and they talked to each other and said, you know what, we haven't really shown our mom the appreciation we should. We're all pretty successful. Why don't we do something really special for our mom this year? They said, we can even kind of make it a competition to see, brothers are always competing with each other. Let's see who can do the best on getting mom the best gift this year for Mother's Day. Well, the first son decides what he's going to do for his mom, and after Mother's Day, they get back together and they start comparing, and the first son said, you know what I did for Mom? I went out and contracted to build her a house, and I built her a new house to live in. $200,000 it cost me to get her this nice house, and we moved her into that house right before Mother's Day for her to enjoy. The other brother said, good job, man, that's great. The second son said, well, I went and contracted a limousine service for Mom. She can't drive anymore. So I got a limousine service and a driver at her disposal all the time. So anytime she wants to go somewhere, that driver is there for her, that car's there. She could go wherever she wants to go whenever. And he said, you know what? It cost me, I did it for 5 years, $50,000 a year for 5 years. Pretty impressive, they said. The third son said, well, I'll tell you what I got, Mom. I got her a parrot. They thought, a parrot? What kind of gift is that? So, well, you don't understand. You know how Mom loves to read the Bible. All her life she's read the Bible, but she's gotten to where she can't read it anymore. Even with a large print, she just can't see it and can't read it anymore. And I got a parrot that can quote the whole Bible to her anytime she wants. It took 20 monks, 10 years to train this parrot to quote the Bible. And they made me commit to giving $100,000 a year to charity for 10 years to buy this parrot from them. They said, man, that is really impressive. About that time, the phone rings and their mom calls. She said, I want to talk to all three of you. So I want to start with the first son, the one that gave me the house. The son gets on the phone. She said, son, I know what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it, but this is the most impractical gift. I don't need this big house. I stay just in one or two little rooms, and I can't even keep up this great big house. Thanks for the thought, but it's really not a very practical gift. She said, let me talk to the other one, the second one. She said, son, you know you got me that limo and that driver. She said, so what do you think? I don't have anywhere to go. I don't need a car. I don't need a driver hanging out there at the house all the time just in case I might decide to go somewhere. I feel awkward about him being there. And quite honestly, he's getting kind of rude on me because I never need him for anything. It wasn't really a practical gift. She said, let me talk to the third boy. She said, son, I want you to know you are the only one that really thought it through and got something really practical for me. I just want to thank you. Out of all three boys, you're the one that made the best choice. I just got to tell you, that chicken was delicious. So moms, if you don't get the just right gift this year, understand how hard it is for us to really be able to say adequately how much we appreciate your sacrifice, because there is no gift that's really adequate for that. But I want to close here today as our praise team gets ready with a word of grace. Because I understand this, at Lakeshore we understand this. Mother's Day is not always a great day for everybody. It's not, for a lot of different reasons. Some have lost their mother recently, and you're still feeling the pains of the grief of losing your mom. And Mother's Day is just a reminder of that, and the grief is just intensified. And some of you have moms that are really sick right now, and you know it won't be long, probably, that they'll still be on this earth. And that's a hard thing. I want you to know that there's some mothers in our church, or some women in our church, who wanted to be mothers and were not able to. And Mother's Day is just another reminder. I wanted to raise a child. I wanted to give birth, but I just wasn't blessed with that. So Mother's Day is a hard reminder that that prayer wasn't answered the way they wanted it to be answered in their lives. If any of those circumstances are where you're at today, I want you to know that our God is a God of all comfort. And if you will draw near to Him today, He'll draw near to you. And He'll provide a comfort for you that the world can't give you, that nobody can give to you but God Himself. So look to Him. For others, this is a day that brings unpleasant memories because not everybody here had a thoughtful, giving, selfless, loving mother growing up. I'm truly sorry if that's what you grew up, lacking that in your life, not having that mother that you would have loved to have had. If this has been your lot in life, I encourage you to give back better than you got. To understand that you could break that chain, that cycle in your life. You could become that mother that God wants you to be. Or if you don't have children of your own, you could be that godly woman influence on somebody else's life that needs that in their life right now. You can let God use you that way, even if you didn't ever have the mother that you wanted to have. You can be that godly influence for some other children. You can reach out with compassion to somebody else who needs the wisdom that you've acquired by the grace of God. Realize that the Lord can empower you to forgive and heal your emotional wounds from the inside out. Even if you've held this grudge and this bitterness against your mother, God can help you get past that. He can help you be relieved of that pain and that guilt. Maybe you've come here this morning with regrets that you weren't the mother you know you should have been. Or maybe right now you think, I'm not being the mother that I ought to be. I want you to understand something. Mothers can be especially self-critical, really hard on themselves. But you have to understand that perfection and motherhood don't go together for anybody. They never have. There's not ever been any perfect mother out there. So if you feel like you've come short, join the club. They all have. Every mom in the world. And almost every mom, if you ask them, would you do something differently if you could go back, would say, yes, I'd do better this next time if I had another shot at it. So understand that you have something in common with every other mother out there if you're feeling some guilt about not being the mom that you ought to have been. I also want you to know that your Heavenly Father has gone to a lot of trouble to take away your feelings of guilt and shame. He made you. He wants you to know how much He loves you. He understands, and He wants to forgive you, and He wants you to have His peace that passes all understanding. He's ready now. He has been ready the whole time to release you from your guilt, for you to give it to Him. You see, Jesus bore it on the cross so that you wouldn't have to keep carrying it around. You can give it up to Him today. He wants to come and make His home in you. And He wants to make His home in your home. Be there for you. Because He knows you're lacking, but He knows you're irreplaceable at the same time. And He wants to be there to give you what you lack, because you are so irreplaceable in His plan for society to function the way it needs to function. He needs moms to be there and be the moms that God has called them to be. That's what the cross is all about. You see, the cross wouldn't be necessary if we could have done it right ourselves, if we could have gotten it right all the time, if we could have not have messed up and made any mistakes. We wouldn't need the cross, but we've all sinned. We've all come short. We all bear the guilt and the shame of sin in our lives. And today, more than anything else, what I want you to hear is that on the cross, Jesus, He gave the ultimate price so that you wouldn't have to walk out of here and one more moment of one more day be burdened by guilt and shame ever again. You can lay it at the foot of the cross today as we stand and sing. We invite you to come.